Hello and welcome to episode 22 of ARM Template Masterclass. This week we're going to be starting a series of quite a few videos where we're going to have a look at a new feature of ARM templates, which is the Bicep language. So a brand new language we can use with our ARM templates created by and supported by Microsoft that might make your life a bit easier when it comes to authoring ARM templates. So let's dive in and have a look at what Bicep is and how it works and a bit of a high level view. And then in the coming videos after this, we will dive a bit more deeply into how you actually use it, how you write Bicep templates and some of the more advanced features. Okay, so the first question that always comes up is, what is Bicep? So Bicep is a new language for creating ARM templates. Bicep isn't a replacement of ARM template. It's not a complete rip out and replace of what we've talked about in all the other videos. It is a layer on top of ARM templates. And this will become more clear when we actually use it and we see about how you compile and build Bicep files. But effectively what it is an abstraction that sits on top of ARM templates and allows you to author your templates in a much cleaner and simpler language that you can then use to create ARM templates under the hood and deploy your resources. I think one of the main aims for Bicep was making life easier for somebody who comes new to Azure and wants to start doing infrastructure as code. And so you can use Bicep really without any knowledge of ARM templates. And whilst we will see that actually we do create ARM templates at the end of the day, you don't actually need to author them manually, and you don't really need to have a great understanding of what's going in there. But if you do already know ARM templates, if you've been through all the other episodes in this series, then there'll be a help to help you understand the concepts and translate them over into Bicep. So I think the easiest way to sort of understand what Bicep is to start by having a look at it. Okay, so on the screen now, what you'll see is we've got two files. The file on the left is a template created using Bicep, and the file on the right is one created using ARM templates. They're doing exactly the same thing, deploying a storage account and a container. But you can see already straight off the bat that the ARM template option is a lot bigger. There's a lot more code there. And in fact, if we look down to the end, I think 52 lines of code in the ARM template version compared to 25 in the Bicep version. So a lot simpler. So secondly, you can see also that the language used in the Bicep template on the left here is a lot simpler than the JSON on the right. So the big change with Bicep is that the language has been simplified. It is still a custom DSL. If you have a look at it, if you ever use Terraform, you'll notice that there are some similarities here. But it does away with a lot of the superfluous JSON you get in ARM templates. So there's not so many curly braces, not so many colons, and so on to make things a bit simpler. So if we compare, scroll down here, if we compare what we've got here, so this is declaring the storage account in ARM templates. This is declaring that same storage account in Bicep. So in this particular resource, they're not actually that massively different in size, but you can see that there is a lot of difference in terms of the verbosity of the language and how easy it is to read. And if we break down the resources, we'll start with them first to see what you've got in the differences. So the first thing is that there is no in a Bicep template there are no sections. So if you remember with ARM, you've got individual sections, parameters, functions, resources, variables, and so on. That doesn't exist in Bicep, so you can put your code wherever you want. You could have your parameters come after your resources if you wanted to, although it might be a bit confusing. Secondly, the type and API version, which in the ARM template over here on the right are part of the resource properties. In Bicep, these are now part of the header. So a header for a resource basically starts with a resource keyword. Then you've got the name of the resource. So in this case, SA is the name. This is just a name that I'm using to refer to it in my template. It's not the name that's actually going to get deployed into Azure. It's just a reference for the resource inside Bicep. But then we've got the actual resource type, which is Microsoft.storage for storage accounts. And then you've got the actual API version as well appended into that header. So all that information has been moved into the resource header. Then you start into the actual resources section. And inside here, is is fairly similar to what you would have ARM template. You've got all those properties, and most of them are are fairly similar. One thing you will note is that referencing parameters is a lot simpler, so you don't need all this square bracket and um, curly bracket information. All you need is the parameter name. So this storage account name here is a parameter, and we've declared that up top here with this param keyword. And again, all you have to do is declare that it's a param, that the name of the parameter and the type. So in this case, string. There are options for doing more complex parameters with default values and those sort of things, which we'll look at in another video. You'll also notice with this location parameter that I'm using the resource group.location as the default value. That's what the equals means, it sets a default value. And so that's just using a simple dot notation to get that. And then we've also got variables, which are declared in pretty much the same way. You've got variable keyword, the name, and then you can set a value here. And we're referencing that again down here in the access tier. We're referencing that variable here. We're just using the name. We've then got down here on line 21 a sub-resource. So this is a container. So the container obviously wants to sit inside the storage account. So in the ARM template, you remember we had to, if we wanted to do this, we had to put a depend on in to reference the storage account that we created above. Quite a lot of complex syntax there. We don't have to here. All we need to do is give the name of the resource as the storage account / default / the container name we want to create. And you'll notice here this sa.name, we can take this resource that we created here called sa, and using dot notation we can reference the parameters. So there's no need for the sort of lookup or the more complex syntax of ARM templates. We could just say sa.name and that'll fill that in with the storage account name. We do the same down here when we're going to create an output, which is another type of resource. Again, we don't need the complex syntax here for an output, just the output keyword, name of the output, type, and then the value. And the value we're referencing the same as above. And actually, we could simplify that even further here by actually just saying, instead of that, we can do container.name. And that'll reference the name from here. And so you can see that language is a lot simpler. There's a lot less of it, and hopefully it's a lot easier to use. Now we're going to go into more detail on things like parameters, variables, these functions and properties and so on in another video. Today's just give you a bit of an overview, but hopefully that makes sense as to how that new language is working, and why it might be easier to use than ARM templates. But before you can use Bicep, there's another concept you need to really understand. And that's the fact, as I mentioned before, is that Bicep files are an abstraction on top of ARM templates. They are not a replacement. And so you can't actually deploy a Bicep template in its native format. There's no way to do that. So what Bicep relies on is that you compile a Bicep file into an ARM template. This is a completely auto-generated ARM template. You don't need to do anything manually to create the ARM template, but that's what actually gets output. And that then means that all the tools we've talked about before to actually deploy the template, so using the CLI, PowerShell, Azure Portal, all those sort of things, all of those are still there and are still valid because what we're outputting from Bicep is an ARM template, and then you deploy that ARM template just like it was an ARM template that you created. But the key thing is we don't have to manually create that template. So if we hop over to the CLI and we'll see what I mean. So there is a Bicep command line tool you need to install. And once you've done that, you can then run the Bicep command. Just a quick look. There are two options in here, just two commands, Bicep build and Bicep decompile. Now we'll talk about decompile later, which allows you to go to turn an actual existing ARM template into a Bicep file. But what we're interested in is the Bicep build command. We just run Bicep build and the name of the file. Run that. Helps if I spell Bicep correctly. Okay, and that's gone ahead and created a file. So if we now look in that directory, we've now got a name with the same name as our bicep file with a JSON extension. So back in Visual Studio Code, you can see we've got this storage-bicep.json file that it's automatically created. And you can see it's added some metadata to it about the version of Bicep that was used to generate this file. I haven't touched this file. I haven't done anything with it. It's automatically created for me by the Bicep command line tool. And you can see we've got our parameters section where it's translated all those parameters we added in Bicep, including the default values in that resource group.location. We've got our variables with the same values. And then we've got our resources. So we've got our storage account. We've got our container. You can see that things like the name is translated that simple reference in Bicep into the standard ARM parameters, bracket storage account name, and so on. And then if we look at the output at the bottom here, we've got this fairly complex set of functions for the value. I didn't have to write any of that. I don't have to really even understand it. And to be honest, I don't even have to look in this file. This, as long as we trust the Bicep command line to have done the right thing, then we can just output this file. And then when I'm ready, I can go to my command line and I can use the new AZ resource group deployment command pointed at that Bicep file, and away we go. Now, one thing to be aware of is you probably noticed here there is no parameters file. So at the minute, if I deploy this ARM template, the CLI is going to ask me to define all those three parameters: the storage account name, the container name, and the location. Actually, not the location because it'll take that default. If I wanted to use a parameter file with this, I absolutely could. But there isn't any Bicep language for parameter files yet, so we would still use the ARM template version of a parameter file. So we could do that now. So let's go ahead and create that. So we could add a parameter. Okay, and then we'd use that as part of our command line for actually deploying the resources. We may or may not see a Bicep version of parameter files in the future, I'm not sure, but at the moment there is not. So that's a very high level view of what Bicep is and why you might want to look into using it. Say over the next course of the next few videos, we're going to have a look at it into more detail, look at some more of the complex things you can do in it, and start delving into the way you can author ARM templates using Bicep. Hopefully I'll see you for those videos. Until then, have a great rest of your day.